Hi guys, I'm Seoyoon from Asian Boss Next. Today we are going to find out what people think of freedom expression going beyond human rights. And we'll conduct interview globally to identify how their culture view the relationship between freedom expression and human rights. In other words, we're going to find out what extent does the freedom expression impact human rights. Let's go!
First, do you think that it is okay for freedom of expression, that is, individuals' freedom to intrude or collide with other people's human rights?
I think that there are circumstances where individual expression has to have its limits. We have laws in the United States, and I assume in South Korea as well, prohibiting harassment, but I don't think that we need any further restrictions on speech than already exist.
In my opinion, I agree that all people have rights to express their opinion, but for this question, I do not agree for that.
I think that freedom of expression is a human right, but sometimes the human rights will, I guess, they'll like bump up against each other. But in general, I would say like as long as they're not too severely like intruded upon.
I think it is to a certain point, because I feel like when you talk about human rights, it can get to a point to where it can become harmful to others. Like for example, like I'm Mexican, so if someone is expressing like their hatred for Mexicans, and like that's fine with me. They have their own opinion. But if it goes beyond a level to where it's hatred and it's rage, that's where I think it should be sort of put a stop to it.
Now we'll talk about a specific case that brought up the controversy of freedom of expression and human rights. Do you think what Chris Rock said was offensive enough, or do you think what Will Smith did was wrong?
I definitely think Will Smith was in the wrong, because I think he believed he could do what he wanted with like his already like existent celebrity image. And Chris Rock, he's known for saying pretty like offensive things, and he always like hosts like these big award ceremonies and says pretty offensive things about celebrities. So I don't think it was out of the normal for him. But I do think it was out of the normal for Will Smith to go up and slap him.
So, by my perspective, I think Chris Rock was very offensive to make a joke about Will Smith's wife who has the hair loss. Making fun of someone's sickness cannot be justified. The action he took is wrong, but I can understand why he chose to do such action.
I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive. I think that in Will Smith's opinion, what Chris Rock said was terribly offensive, but I also don't think that Will Smith's reaction was that big a deal.
I think Will Smith's reaction was a bit too much. It wasn't a very bad joke, and like going up on stage and slapping him, like the first rule you learn in kindergarten is to not use violence, to not slap other people and other kids. So I think his reaction was way over the top. Yeah.
Then now changing the perspective, let's imagine if you were the Will Smith, and would you think that you would do the same thing, or would you like endure all the insults and deal with what Chris Rock verbalized?
I think in this specific case, if I were Will Smith, I don't think that this joke was particularly egregious. But I do think that it is good for people to stand up for their family when actual serious insults or threats are present. I think that kind of response is reasonable. Just in this case, I believe it was an overreaction.
I think I would just try to hold my patience and just like upload a message post something on social media, like openly targeting Chris Rock about like what he said, like it was very insulting and stuff like that. Instead of just getting to him and sucking in front of everyone.
I definitely wouldn't endure it, but I definitely wouldn't make a big scene at a very large event with a lot of people, because obviously if I'm like Will Smith, I already have so many people looking at me in the media, and I know that if one wrong action can really like make people say stuff on the media, like a lot of negative stuff or anything like that. So I think I wouldn't make such a harsh action. If I wanted to address the problem, I would address it either like probably after the whole thing.
I definitely would not have gone up there and like slapped him in such a public arena. Yeah, in my case, I probably wouldn't have done anything. And if it really bothered me, I might have like talked to him after, been like, don't do that again. But not such a public display.
I feel like me personally, since I'm more of like an introvert and more of a shy person, I feel like I would have held it in. I won't be like, hey, I didn't like that, you know, all that. I'll sort of hold it in and sort of just let it go, because I don't want to hurt someone's emotions or feelings at that part of time.
Most Koreans showed a positive response to the actions of Will Smith, and we're really curious how Americans would say about this situation.
Well, for me as an American, I automatically was so shocked. I was like, oh, wow, like, what happened? Like, usually Will Smith is seen as, like, this really nice guy, and, like, I mean, he's, like, a celebrity, so it's so crazy for him to, like, act out of his, like, normal, like, nice guy image. So I was like, oh, like, maybe because I hadn't seen what Chris Rock had said. But when I watched what Chris Rock had said, I was like, oh, like, I don't think he should have slapped him over that.
Okay, so the next question is, in relation to this situation, there are some sayings that Will Smith's movie is being on hold because of the situation. And what do you think about this criticism in the media? Do you think it's excessive, or should he be criticized?
I think I can see both sides of it. Like, I agree yet disagree, because I do think it's somewhat excessive, because I feel like he made a mistake, but I don't feel like that should affect his work. But I can also see it from, like, the movie, like, producer's side, where they don't want their movie to be affected by his bad image right now. So it's kind of hard to say.
Oh, I certainly think that it's excessive. Ultimately, nobody was seriously harmed in this case. If two people have an issue with each other and things get physical, that's between them two. It's unfortunate that it had to happen like on live television, and I'm sure that's embarrassing for both of them and their families. But I think that it's an overreaction for Will Smith to be losing acting positions and things of that nature over this.
I personally think that his criticism is excessive. Of course, this kind of different views arises because of the different perspectives we have with the United States, but I still think that it's unbearable to tell a joke about my wife, about his wife's pain.
Yes, many Koreans sympathize to Will Smith's action, and his reaction was not guilty. But I think we have to consider the cultural differences between the Korea and the United States. But internationally, I also believe, yes, Will Smith should not be aggressive in that situation. So, yes.
I think people would actually be more like, oh, he shouldn't have done that, because in Pakistan or in the Desi culture in general, it's more cultural. they really put an emphasis on what other people will think about you. So I think if thinking about Will Smith and how he acted on stage, they would be like, oh, now what is everyone else gonna think about him? Like everyone's gonna be like, oh, he has anger problems, or like, oh, they're gonna look down upon him. So I think if we're looking at it from, like Pakistani or like Desi aspect of it, they would probably be like, that wasn't a smart choice.
I think there was an incident long time ago, when one big talk show host, I think either he slapped someone or got slapped by someone. And it was a big deal, but not really on the basis of, is it okay to okay to slap someone, but more of, did he deserve it? But like, that died down pretty quickly. It never took the proportion of Will Smith's case, no. Me personally, I think that's a bit much. Because it wasn't a comedic kind of atmosphere. Chris Rock was making a joke, and I know he probably did not expect a slap, but still it was in a comedic atmosphere. And I'm not saying violence is okay in a comedic atmosphere, but it was a slap, It wasn't like he pulled out a gun or anything like that. So I think some kind of backlash, what he received, was justified, but not to the extent of where his entire career is kind of on the line for it.
I think if the same thing happened in my country, I think they definitely would have defended Will Smith. Because I feel like very much the part of Mexican culture is very much caring for family and caring for others and others that you love. I don't really see a reason for why they delayed the movie, because I understand what they did was wrong, but also I feel like that's a little bit too extra to delay a whole movie and a whole production set with people who they personally hired for that movie. To delay it over one simple little mistake is a bit too extra, in my opinion.
Okay, so when we try to look at the incident, the Will Smith incident where he slapped Chris Rock during the Academy Awards in March of this year, of course, we have our own thoughts about what's right and wrong and our own perceptions, but I think it's important to understand the larger cultural and social factors, the context in which the incident happened. And so as a sociologist, I encourage my students to think about the larger contextual factors in which these contextual factors shape public perception. Okay, and so one of the factors that I think we should consider is the racial stereotype and misconception that the public has about, specifically about men of color. And these are, of course, wrong perceptions where we connect race with violence. And so in that larger context where people have stereotypes about men of color, this is what happened, right? And so what are the implications that these stereotypes and misconceptions have on people looking at Will Smith's action and judging those actions? The second factor that I think that we have to understand when we're trying to understand the larger contextual factors is taking a feminist perspective and thinking about Jada as an empowered individual who can speak up for herself. In this incident, we see that Will Smith takes an emotional stance, and he takes an immediate kind of action to kind of protect and defend her. But if we think about it, she herself is somebody who can take a stance and make a statement about this. She has her own talk show. She's a very public figure who is not afraid to talk about her personal conditions. And so, previously she's talked about her autoimmune condition before and shared that with the public. And so the fact that he has to do it for her kind of bothered some people in the public, that, you know, why doesn't he let her take action herself if she wants to? Okay. The third factor that we have to think about in the larger context of things is something about Chris Rock. I mean, Chris Rock is a famous stand-up comedian, an actor, and we have to notice the fact that he's making a joke about Black women of color, and especially about their hair. And in the U.S. context, hair, especially for Black women, it's a very culturally sensitive issue. And so, you know, his joke was culturally inappropriate. I think he knew better not to do that. Also, he is an individual who produced a documentary. I mean, his documentary title is Good Hair, and he explored the idea of why hair is so important for the African American community in the U.S. So, and in Black culture. And so in the larger context of things, I think he probably should have known not to make such jokes like that, right? So we have to know that context. The last thing that I want to talk about is this difference between, a distinction that I want to make between intention and impact, right? You know, I hear many just kind of individuals talking about how, oh, I didn't intend to do this, right? My intention was pure, or my intention was not this or that. But we have to accept the fact that, well, my intention could be different, but the impact or the consequence of my action is what's important to understand, you know, why somebody or someone feels that an action is inappropriate or hurtful or damaging, right? And so in this instant, when we look at the incident, sure, Chris Rock has good intentions, right? He is a comedian, he's making jokes, he wants to entertain people, but then the impact of his words were probably very destructive to a particular individual and the fans that were who were watching this incident. So we have to consider those factors when we're trying to understand the larger context of things.
Today we found out how European, American, and Asian cultures view the relationship between freedom of expression and human rights. How much do you think is tolerable when the freedom of expression of individuals collides with human rights of other people? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe our channel. And remember to stay curious.